Hey, what's happening everyone? Pragmatic Addict here. So I just got out of seeing a film called The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster. So I heard a little bit about this film, but I didn't actually know too much about it. From what I gathered from the only time that I saw the trailer, like last week, was that it was going to be a specific kind of take on the Frankenstein tale. I also just heard absolutely rave things about it. It is from a first-time director. This is also the next film from collaboration RLJE Pictures and Shudder, as well as Crypt TV. What the fuck? But this movie, basically, now that I have seen it, yes, it is a kind of take inspired by the classic Frankenstein tale, where essentially this girl, her older brother Chris, is brutally murdered, and she is basically this science girl. She's very smart, knows a lot about science era. She even has the nickname in her neighborhood as the mad scientist. She basically finds a way to bring her older brother back, but once that happens and she does bring him back, things take a turn for the worse. So now that I have just gotten out of this movie, let's talk about The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster. So right off the bat, you see very personally and pretty heavily how death has affected this girl's life. We see a backstory that is very tragic that involves a lot of her family, obviously her brother, but more so where it further pushes that point where you're like, okay, this girl definitely has some beef with death, where this introduction actually ends with her saying the line, "Death is a disease, and I'm gonna cure it." It felt a bit more dramatic and heavy and mature than maybe I was actually expecting this movie to kind of feel, but it honestly just made me care so much about this character. It made me feel so invested in maybe this kind of a controversial tale about this girl trying to bring her deceased brother back, as well as her views upon death and life itself. It made me so curious about what the actual nature of this film was gonna be. And you do get pretty solid setup to this world, this girl's life, even this neighborhood that she resides in. You get little nods and little breadcrumbs toward specific people, ones that are going through certain situations, ones that you just don't get very good vibes from right off the bat. Just characters that you can only see connecting to a story this raw and dramatic, and you just get so much more character to this girl. Just how she reacts to certain situation and each individual, even seeing her interact with certain teachers at school with certain subjects and certain topics that these teachers bring up, and you just really get that idea that this girl has been through a lot. She's not scared to share her voice, her opinions, and again, it's just one of those movies that, regardless of how flip-flop things may be, if it maybe does feel like it's not quite on par with other things that were very strong, which that is the case in quite a bit of this movie, you're always rooting for this girl, and she's always the standout in every bit and piece of this movie. This is just a story that honestly just tells the hell out of itself, and a lot of it is due to this girl's part in this story. And in the first act especially, you really feel exactly what the film wants you to feel, because it just does such a good job at fleshing out this character's life. I do want to say though, this film is obviously a more horror-based kind of background. It is a Frankenstein-inspired tale again. But with me not knowing too much about this film, not knowing too much of what to expect, and with me being a massive horror fan, this being my favorite genre, I gotta say, when the horror actually came into this film, and I actually saw what the horror was gonna be in this film, which there is a lot of it, I didn't know how much horror was actually going to be in this film, how much drama, how much, of a character piece this was going to be. I will say that once I saw everything that this film was going to have to it, including the horror aspect of this movie, that horror monster side, this character's backstory was 100% what I was more invested in than anything in this movie. To the point where I could have just gone for this movie as a raw drama about this character's life more than anything. That when this Frankenstein horror side came into the picture, was actually like the center of attention, was actually the storyline and plot. I wasn't as invested as I thought I would have or should have been. And I will say, just all in all, the theme or idea that this film may have seemed like it was promoting more than anything, just this Frankenstein horror-inspired tale. When you look back at it in the grand scheme of everything, it does feel like, tonally especially, just the weaker side, where I would actually say that the film, it actually felt like it was struggling with the horror side of things more than anything. Where ironically, you think that fleshing out this character's background, having such harsh, raw variety and attention to detail that was actually very well taken care of and very well done, you would have thought that that would have been the part that maybe wasn't fleshed out enough or wasn't as strong enough, where just a horror tale inspired by Frankenstein with the circumstances would have been the easier part to nail and would have been the more consistent and more, I guess, center of the actual movie. But in actuality, again, it just felt like the weakest side of the story that should have been the most easiest and most obvious to nail, especially with how well they fleshed out everything up to this plot of the movie being, this horror center. And it ended up just being a bit of a letdown for me, which also brings me to want to talk about that once this actually does become the main plot and centerpiece of the story, it does start to feel like more of a not only traditional horror movie, but more of just a movie in general. Characters are introduced and side plots are happening, where a lot of these sequences kind of feel like they could only land for people that were expecting these sorts of things or came for these sorts of things, or where this could only suit for like a specific audience. Again, it's not bad and it still feels like the same movie as it goes on. It's just one of those things where the further it goes on, the more the film does start to feel like it's weakening a bit. Also, as the movie goes on, like I said a minute ago, not only does it start to feel more like a generic film in general, but it really does start to feel like more of a actual traditional horror film. There's a lot of jump scares, there's a lot of cringe character moments, there's a lot of times where I really just was surprised at how many times I was lending eye roll moments toward my viewing experience of this movie. Another thing also is that, specifically with the horror as the movie goes on, there are certain scenes in the horror vein that when they come up, they just feel like they should have been more expanded on, more fleshed out, and maybe paid more attribution to the actual film's story. And the focus and tones of some of these scenes just honestly felt so out of touch and so unevenly paced that it honestly just catches you off guard and feels honestly just baffling that it starts to make you think that maybe this film just didn't know how to incorporate horror. Because again, for the most part, this does feel like a consistent movie, as it goes on. And whether you're watching for this girl's backstory or for the drama of the movie, or yes, as a horror fan, there is enough here and there that will keep you on board. And with this character, especially in, however way you're viewing this movie, she absolutely does hold the movie like no fucking problem. But I do want to say this though, getting to the last act, it definitely had me forgiving a little bit and just loosening up a little bit. Because like I was saying, whether you're viewing this movie or are on board, whether it be for the drama aspect, the character aspect, or the horror aspect, this final act really does conclude and really does take advantage of and flesh out all of those different cinematic aspects in this movie in, I would say, personally, a satisfying enough route where when you do look back at the film, it is just overall a fine movie, all in all. There are definitely aspects of the film that definitely fall and weaken, and certain vibes of the movie that don't nearly hit as much as not only other things, but as really the first act of this movie. But by the end, the movie is consistent enough and does deliver enough on a lot of different aspects that in the end, I would give this movie a pass. It's alive! It's alive! So those are my overall thoughts on Angry Girl and the Black Monster.
Holy fuck, I just butchered that title. Jesus Christ.
I do think that this film is worth checking out for a lot of different variety. Also as an indie film, also as a first-time director, for the most part, this is one of those films that it just delivers so much and delivers so many different, I guess, ideas as far as how that's going to deliver to whatever audience you may be, that I would recommend going and checking this out to see what you gain out of it. But yes, guys, that is going to do it for my review of Angry Black Girl and Her Monster. Thank you guys so much for checking out this review. I will see you guys very soon. And the next one, it is getting toward the middle of June. There's a lot of releases checking out, a lot of movies that I am excited to talk about. And with that being said, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here. I hope you guys are having a great night, a great day, and thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.